Hello, thank you for watching my glorious newest podcast, episode 5. I am here in the company of Johanna.
Hey.
We would just do this video introduction to get you, the awesome viewer, to know us. No, right now we're a loss of words.
Well,
Quickly, make this less awkward.
how do you do?
Oh, my plan. Yeah, and we have a little bit of bad news because I was really excited at one point. Like, I was like, oh, Johanna, you really need to, stop talking so cautiously. And then her microphone, got disattached because I flapped my arms. Can we deal with that, though, is the question.
I think it will be okay.
Yeah, I hope so, because, genius post-audio edits. Anyway, I hope you enjoy.
You don't need anything. You are just fine. There's nothing you need. Everything that you need in life in order to do it, you have it in you.
And a most gracious and fanciful welcome to this Flights of Fancy, episode 5. I am very delighted to be in the presence of... Wait, I don't think I can actually see a person in front of me, because all I can see is one thing, and that thing happens to be a waveform. However, I think I can detect that this waveform comes in the shape of a very particularly shaped person. Please be welcomed, Johanna.
Thank you, and thank you also for including that introduction, which is very relevant
I was
to my being.
I was encouraged to your encouraging smile, so maybe you shouldn't have smiled. Why? Do you disagree with that introduction? Do you think you should?
No, I think it's perfectly accurate. I don't know if I could have done any better job myself.
Yeah, what makes you into a waveform, would you say?
I think maybe the better question would be, what does not make me into a waveform?
Isn't that I somehow smell kind of a logical misnomer there, though.
Okay, fair.
So maybe I shouldn't burden myself with the introduction. Maybe you should be just so free to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Johanna, and human being, supposedly. I'm 25 years of age, and I am a student at the University of Groningen at the Department of Religious Studies.
Now you copiously throw around labels. However, we also have agreed that we are both like-minded in the sense that we seem to reject the relevance of labels.
We need labels. I mean, words are labels. We need them in order to communicate certain things to one another, but I guess we just shouldn't take them all that seriously at all times.
Why not?
But they're helpful. Well, because they're representations, but maybe they don't always tell about the essence of the actual thing itself.
Yeah, generally. There's always a gap between representing one thing and the reality of one thing. I suppose that's also something that the social sciences indoctrinate us with to a very large degree. Or maybe it's not so much the case in psychology because you bachelored in that. You did psychology, which is also a social science.
Yeah, sure.
Is it also the case that there you have this feeling of words, representations?
I think psychology is definitely one of the fields that is, if to say it, to maybe suffering a little bit of its own labels and own language. But I mean, there's useful definitions as well. Actually, what I wanted to tell you earlier is that, did you know that Carl Jung coined the terms extroverted and introverted?
Really?
Yeah.
Carl Jung, the psychologist who was an apprentice of Freud.
Yeah.
What did he have did he attach a different meaning to it than we do now, you think?
No, I think the meaning has stayed essentially the same.
What is it?
Introverted is the person who is paying more attention to the world of their imagination and their own internal realms, essentially, and extrovert is a person who draws a lot of energy from the outside. So
Right.
I guess he made the point of distinction also to do with how people draw energy. So an introverted person would be somebody who gains a lot from being in their own world. An extrovert person is somebody who gets a lot from other people. Of course, the distinction is not clear-cut either.
Which are you more, would you say?
I think it can also change in time. I've always been quite extroverted, but I don't know. I'm both.
Ambivert, shifting. Yeah, it actually reminds me of a thing that I did want to ask you, because I think you made a very nice statement in one of our discussions earlier when I was talking to you about my smoking addiction, and that as one thing that I should take account of, you emphasized, is that we don't so much have a personality as that we have an idea of a personality. I think that's kind of relevant to your doubt here, is it not?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I've been thinking about this concept of non-personality.
Non-personality.
Yeah. I mean, when you are just a part of something that supports and substitutes something. And I think some of the greatest personalities that we think of as greatest personalities are actually non-personalities.
What do you mean?
Because then the emphasis is not on the individual themselves, but in the interactions that they create. Because we are always creating interactions.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We as in people.
We as in people, and we as in things.
Yeah.
Objects.
Yeah, an interaction never stands on its own, but it's always between things.
Yeah, between things, in a constant flux.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good thought in that way. Like, it reminds me, that a personality can ever come to light, so to say. Like, a personality can only ever appear in relation to another personality, right?
Exactly.
So in that way, it's in flux.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I definitely agree that. I think it's basically a sophisticated way of saying you are someone else always with another person, you know?
Completely.
But I think this insight many people have also. Not to belittle it, of course. And also a note of warning in this podcast to follow, because I should not, when interrogating you on your various worldviews, ideas, and so on, we should not get stuck into the semantics of it. Because I apparently tend to be a guy who would do that. Why do I have to be wary?
I think the words and how we put them are very important. So in that sense, it's always good to have people around who are paying careful attention to the words.
Yeah, but I think you want to go elsewhere also with this. Because now it sounds like, okay, well, words can mislead, but I think you also attach meaning to something beyond just strict definition, strict language, or something in that direction, is it not?
Yeah.
Well, my warning, your warning to me was we shouldn't get stuck on the semantics. And you kind of said that as a reaction to me, that I kept bugging you about, oh yeah, okay, use this term, use that term, but how do you define it? Where's the limit? Where's the threshold, you know? But the impression that you give me is, okay, well, if I do that too much, we kind of lose your thought or something.
Yeah, I guess it's always like, you know, there's different disciplines as well. They have different language that they use. And when they're in their particular field, everybody speaks the same language. You know, that can be people who are in religious studies, that can be people who are in psychology, people who are in economics. They always share the same language. But then when they're talking about to somebody who is outside of that particular faculty or field, they may be talking about the same thing, but the language is actually just different. And in those kind of situations, I think you can also, it's okay to take the feeling of what the person is saying and make one's own interpretation of it. I mean, language is a game just as anything else. We use it to play. And
so the reference to Wittgenstein, language game. Okay, well, you were ahead of your time, because this is a female philosophy also. But let us abandon this very casual and very light introduction and let us dive deep down into the shit, as I always put it.
all right.
You want to introduce the main topics according to basically two sides, because according to two directions, so we can go in. Because I want to ask you the question, Johanna, who are you? And then you identify basically two possible answers, namely experiences or current worldview. Remember, like we should introduce that.
Well, yeah, I think we were talking about is that the experience that I have of myself is not always according to the labels that are given.
Mm.
But I am willing to use the labels as well, because I know that they sometimes communicate more. But I think that was also what we were already talking in the beginning in regards to feeling like a waveform, because when you go to the bottom of it, how many of us really, 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 some kind of deep core of us associates with all of these labels that we are, our age and our gender and our nationality and our education and our parents and our future aspirations. And these are just words on paper, and they're also repetitions because we get asked those things very much. But I don't think they are per se the most interesting or the most accurate aspect about a person's idea, either idea of themselves or.
Yeah, definitely.
I am a fake waveform because that was kind of like a joke.
You expected yourself not to talk like a waveform because that was kind of a joke. Okay. Yeah, so, okay. The future Tim, the editing Tim, will still consider whether he will cut out the part relating to a waveform, but he's not sure yet because maybe he likes it. Like, I can't account for him because, as you emphasized already also, who are we even in our present states and idea of personality?
I cannot answer that question. I really cannot.
Else you will be held liable for it in court, right?
Yeah. We'll see.
Okay, so to kind of trace back the thought we were on earlier. So yeah, you made the interesting remark, like we have a lot of labels and ways to identify ourselves with, but you also seem to think, well, hey, but what if there was something more to us than just labels?
Oh, I'm absolutely sure that there's much, much more to us than just those labels. We are bodies, but according to many other definitions, maybe there are things like a spirit, or maybe there is things like a soul, or who knows? Maybe these things are something that we don't talk about so much in the modern day, but they might as well just be there.
Yeah, and to first sketch the very superficial story of how this material shape came to be here. You have been here in the nice city of Groningen for the last, what was it, 5 years? Since
5 years.
Yeah, 2012. First you did psychology, but you were a bit disillusioned.
Yeah, I was a bit delusioned. Well, as many people here who have studied know, the program is really large, and there's a lot of multiple choice examination, and I wasn't really intrigued by a lot of the material that we were studying. I was also struggling with statistics, but during that time there were also many other things going on.
Yeah, you found it repetitive, it was an education of mass production, there was no individual attention, you were basically uninspired.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm also willing to take some of the responsibility for that. But in short, I felt that it was just not answering really the questions that I had before I went studying psychology. Like, I was just like, what is a human being, and what do we do here? How can we look for better to organize ourselves in our lives? After completing the bachelor, I felt that I had found none of the answers to any of those questions.
How did the bachelor feel in answering those questions?
It just didn't even address them. It just didn't even address them.
What did they address?
I guess they address a lot about diagnostic manual and basically a lot of these kind of labels that I think really contribute in making the society to be a worse place for a lot of people.
Wait, what? Worse place? How so?
A diagnostic manual in itself.
Yeah, it's like a standardized procedure for therapy, right?
Yeah,
or psychology.
Yeah, DSM is basically all the classifications for different mental illnesses that are out there. I think in 2014 there were 250 something. Now it's cut down to something like 160, but there's still a lot. And essentially those are just different categories for how people are pathological in current society. And I mean, I understand that this is the way how psychology operates these days, but I was just becoming increasingly desperate to look for something else. And that's how I also ended up studying religious studies later. And maybe that was also something that I should have done since the beginning, because I was really interested in actually the meaning of things and just going deeper, basically.
You ended up in religious studies faculty class, mostly dealing with ancient mythology, and you were really inspired there.
Yeah, during that last year of my studies in psychology, I started taking a lot of courses at the religious studies faculty. That was also at the first time when I started reading some of the works of Carl Jung, who's this Swiss psychoanalyst. And I started to understand that, okay, actually, there are so many different ways of looking at psychology as well. And the way how I've been trained during my bachelor program is certainly not the only way. And that there is ways of incorporating mythology and religion with psychology that makes it to be so much richer and more abundant, and also more relatable on a lot of ways, more personal.
Yeah, I want to ask, what is psychoanalysis? Then I think of that you do think that psychology and philosophy can't really be seen as separate. So maybe that means that part of what psychoanalysis is also a certain way to view the psyche, the soul, the person. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, psychoanalysis is a movement in psychology that started in the early 20th century by Sigmund Freud, and essentially it's characterized by the acknowledgement that there is unconscious drives in the human being. And we learn about Freud also in our standard psychological education. But I have not read too much of the works of Freud. I was very inspired by Jung, who was also a disciple of Freud for some time. But Jung, instead of just thinking that these unconscious drives were something personal in the individual, which was Freud's idea, thought that perhaps there is something collective. Perhaps there is a collective psyche that we all somehow have access to, and perhaps that is the place where we go whilst we dream. And that's where his psychology was cultivated from these kind of ideas. And
you were kind of reminded of this in your mythologies class.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually where I first got introduced to, well, I did one presentation on Jung and Freud during my mythology class, so readings of Jung were also part of this.
Oh, really?
Mythology course. Yeah, indeed, because Jung is one of the most well-known comparative mythologists as well.
He's a bit of a loner in that he does take interest in that, and that he takes it seriously. Because I don't imagine it to be a popular topic in academics, like dreams and myths. And like interdisciplinary sense, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, he was a loner in very, very many ways. But also at the time of the early 20th century, actually dealing with supernatural and paranormal phenomena in psychology was relatively common in regards to our understanding of it now.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jung was really interested in this kind of topics since the very early part of his career, but about the way when he started integrating the mythology, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if many other psychologists have done.
And there was also these other works by authors involving so-called archetypical stories that you were reminded of in mythologies class.
Yeah. I guess it was just this spring where I finally started reading again. Like I used to be, when I was a kid, I used to read a lot, and then as I started university, somehow I just stopped reading for fun. When I was finally, advised to look for a different kind of literature that was not about psychology per se, I just found this tremendous amount of inspiration to actually just enjoy stories. Enjoy.
I've also think that's really interesting, because you also emphasized it's also pretty refreshing to just have these mythology classes focus on really, really ancient history as opposed to just pretty recent history that everyone is involved with.
Yeah.
Like I also think the Romans and the Greeks and, well, whoever, they're pretty sick in a way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it feeds your imagination in a completely
Yeah, feeds your
different way.
imagination, yeah. But that's also like a brain fart I often have. I always call my thoughts brain farts, don't know why I like the words. But I mean, there's a lot of work, right, in academics and then from authors to just describe circumstances in the past. And what I always think is, well, imagine you have this like work of history about ancient Greece, and it says like, okay, these people lived here and they had the king with that name and their gods were called by this name and so on, you know. But then I think like, okay, well, the goal of the historian must clearly be to give us, the modern audience, this chance to, as you say, immerse ourselves in that world, to kind of get a bit of feel of what it's like to be in that time and place. But then I immediately think, well, how could we ever even come marginally close to that? Because how could we ever imagine what it would be like to live there with all that whole state of consciousness that these people were in, you know? And that's so incredibly far-fetched, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, perhaps it's far-fetched, but it's I don't know if that's the function of the stories either, you know. It's like,
You mean the history books, or?
yeah, I mean, it's like, if I understand correctly, you're saying that they may not be, the representations may not be accurate in the sense of,
Yeah, it's basically, to put it in a simpler way, like if you would read a history book on the Roman Empire, how well could you prepare yourself for taking a time machine to the actual Roman Empire? Like, that's the question, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think not at all. You could just as well not have read the history book, I think.
But I mean, just to learn about history is also just about learning about ourselves. We are beings that have been around for a really long time. And yeah, I mean, that was also something that I took from Jung, is that something about our evolutionary history of the whole humankind affects us as individuals as well. So actually, when you're reading about the history of somebody that seems very distant and far away, it's still, you know, it's somebody who's from your species. It's part of your history as well.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think it's more just about understanding that how complex we are and how, from like what kind of circumstances we've come to this point. And I think that's just something that is mind-boggling over and over again, and that's why we learn about history. It's not so we could take a time machine and go back and be able to survive in those environments, but it's just for our imagination and for our understanding of what we really are as human beings.
The archetypical stories aspect that you encountered in the mythologies class, you didn't really elaborate on it yet.
Well, I think that was one of the really exciting things that I also discovered through this class, was that, you know, there are certain kind of myths, for instance, and they seem to have similar characteristics across different parts of the world and also different time periods. For instance, take the flood myth. It's something that appears in many different religious scriptures. It's just a really interesting question to ask, like, why is that? Like, why is there certain stories that are archetypal that appear in all over the world, and what can we infer of that, or can we infer anything? Maybe we cannot infer anything, but it's a fun task to try.
Because as you finished your psychology bachelor, and as you entered into that dimension, so to say, you found out that you had more questions and answers. Also, as you said, well, I started out with, you know, doubts. What is a person? What is life? And you found out that some of the questions were really essential, like, what are human beings? What are our belief systems? What are belief systems on its own? What are mystical experiences, and how do they relate to everything? And kind of, I think, the whole project, or the whole connection with Jung and mythical stories, is that you do find something there that you didn't find in psychology.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are your attempts at answering those questions?
I think my attempts are in the kids' shoes. Like I'm in the kids' shoes. You know, I'm just looking around for different things.
Yeah.
But I think what I found actually the most important thing is that life is really mysterious. You know, it's not like a nourishment for the everything that is around us is also in ourselves.
Right.
But
yeah.
And somebody is also
what you
telling
mean? I think what you mean is that we internalize it. Like if we, it's not like people make us want to buy stuff, but we actually want to buy stuff from our deepest soul also because we believe what we've been taught. And that's what you mean, right?
I mean, we believe that we can buy ourselves certain identities, and that's why we have these needs, because we would like to be something else, and maybe that's because we don't know what we would actually need to feel that way or be that way. I mean, we're constantly wanting something, and that's because also somebody's telling us all the time what is worth something and what is not worth something. It's like we're not determining our own values anymore. And then when you're reading about something that happened maybe 800 years ago, and somebody will tell you like, give a shit, you know, but it's like this is important. You know, it's like I decide that this is important, and then you draw inspiration out of that. And I think that was maybe something so special that came to me through these studies in religion. Just that I felt like I was determining by myself what is important. And especially because I chose such a niche study that really like a lot of people were like, how are you gonna employ yourself in the future?
I'm really a big fan of history too, and all periods and all places, but I'm actually often reminded of the thought that when, you know, but because you do hear those challenges a lot, like, oh yeah, Roman Empire, oh yeah, Middle Ages, why would you give a shit? Like the only thing that matters is like the last 50 years, right? But in a way I would defend it maybe by saying, what if the ancient past is even more important to understand than the modern past? Because if you think about it, it's a bit like the butterfly effect idea, right? Like if you take a time machine, stupid time machine again. Like if you take the time machine and you kill one person 10 years ago, then that whole like really complicated chain of events that is altered by you killing that person 10 years ago leads to everything, the whole world being different, I imagine, because, you know, that person sees people he doesn't see people he would otherwise see, and then those people take different actions, and so on and so on and so on, and then everything, the whole world's changed just because you altered one thing. But the whole idea of the butterfly effect is the farther you go back into the past, the larger the consequences are of small changes, you know? Like if you would kill a person in the Roman Empire, then that would even have bigger effects because the chain of events leading up to the past is longer or something. I'm not sure, like maybe you can paraphrase this more efficiently.
Well, I mean, I guess I mean, I understand that also in terms of population increase, because, you know, we've been exponentially growing in population. So yeah, if you would change the face of one person, that would be the ancestor of so many of us.
I'll phrase it in a different way. Like our whole identity and all our philosophy and our society and our culture and stuff, they are a chain, you know, like a classic chain of like interlinked parts and stuff. And the last piece of the chain is maybe 10 years ago, and then 20 years was a chain piece before that, the first year's chain piece before that. But they all build on each other, right? So then it goes back until the Roman Empire. Like in the Roman Empire for the West, already the first foundations were laid, you know, for the world we have today. And in that way, it's like a pyramid also. It's like a base that builds up to it. And that's like the deepest level.
And that's our culture as well. You know, it's just that we now we think about our culture as a certain thing, but then all of those things that happened so long ago are still part of our culture. They're just a little bit distant, and I mean, they've changed their form and shape.
What else interests you about the world of myths?
About the world of myths? Well, I mean, like we talked about already, it's the archetypal forms. Archetypes are basically these, it's a Jungian concept as well. Archetypes are patterns that manifest themselves in certain form repeatedly over time. So some of the most famous archetypes that he names are, for instance, the trickster or the great mother or hero archetype. So these are something that are in a lot of different stories. If you look at the mythologies, you can see that there are these kind of archetypal patterns. And then if you look at our lives, you can see that there are these kind of archetypal patterns. So actually, I think this notion of archetypes is something that ties our world into mythologies. We think that mythologies are also something that are forgotten and are part of the past, but this is also from Jung. He says that we all have a myth, and if you don't determine your myth, you actually don't know the myth that you're living by.
As in like a personal myth, like individual myth?
Yeah, exactly.
I find that a bit of a oxymoron in a way, because I thought a myth is supposed to be like a story told among a group, that's as opposed to like a story you tell yourself, right? Or not?
Yeah, but that's the whole thing, that we're all partaking into the myths.
Yeah, okay.
But but in a way that we, like, the same patterns from the myths, they repeat in our lives as well. And but if you don't know anything about mythology, then you would never know that there's any kind of parallels. I guess it's just because there's a lot of mythologies that are just great. They have great moral teachings, and they're just good stories, and they can enrich your own life, and they're very identifiable. And one thing that I also learned in this mythology culture is that myths are very well part of our popular culture as well, and they just get diluted over time. They always get transformed and changed into something else.
They have an example of like a myth or something? Maybe just a myth that you like generally, like storytelling is always nice.
Well, actually, the first one that I was just came to, I have to say that I haven't read so much of these different types of mythologies, but I like a lot of the Greek stories, because they are, the Greeks are very irrational in a lot of ways, and they just do crazy shit all the time, and they just kill one another, and there's just this continuous madness going on. Yeah, also the Gnostics have some great myths. There's a myth about the creation of the world. So finding out about Gnosticism was actually quite revolutionary for myself personally, because I also had Christian upbringing. Gnosticism is a scholarly term, but it means different way of, from my impression, it's a different way of understanding Christianity. It places certain things at the center of its belief systems that are not really found in the traditional way of interpreting Christianity. So the Gnostics believe that there's a thing called logos, and that was actually something that Jesus brought. So logos was brought by Jesus, and it is information of our own divinity.
I think what you're trying to say is that Jesus advocated an idea which was already pre-existing in like the mind of the local cultures, because they were influenced by that Greek philosophical concept, maybe?
Well, some people argue that as well, but I think
like Plato thought of it or something, right?
Yeah, there's some links between Platonism and Gnosticism as well. But as far as I've understood, Gnosticism is a separate thing.
Okay.
Because if you think about it, at the time when Christianity was being formed, obviously there was this dude around, Jesus, and he had many followers, but they did not all agree upon how to do things. Actually, they were pretty scattered. So that's why there were different groups that started to formulate. And there were a lot of groups that today, from the main point of view of different churches, are considered heretic. And Gnostics were one of them. They have a very rigid understanding of the nature of the universe, which they consider to be very dualistic. So they see everything in the material world as being evil. And in that sense, it actually corresponds with something of Hinduism, because they believe that this material world was put in place by this evil force, and therefore it's completely illusionary. And actually, the realization of the illusionary nature of reality is the stepping point towards this transcendence, and then you can actually begin to reach towards some higher states.
And Gnosticism has that too?
So that is Gnosticism.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just that it shares the understanding of the illusionary nature of reality.
I'm reminded of a scene in a movie I really like,
Yeah.
where a guy explains Gnosticism, because it was in the context of Philip K. Dick also being into it. And
Yeah.
how he explained it, maybe that's also what some people believe, is that the Christian version would be that the illusionary world we live in right now is basically a lie told to us by Satan, because according to like the story of Jesus, we are supposed to like leave this world and come into heaven. But still, it's also reality that for the last 2,000 years history has been going on. So the question is like, when is that apocalypse coming? Like, when are the angels coming? And then the answer of the Gnostics is, what if all that time, those 2,000 years, really have not been real years? It's not really been a real progression of time. But what the reality is that we are only stuck in one specific moment in which God is asking us, do you want to be one with eternity? And that we are just constantly saying no. Is that a bit similar to it?
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, it is, because basically, from the point of view of Gnosticism, it's, as far as I've understood in regards to Gnosticism, is that we are constantly wanting to live in the illusion because we want good. Therefore, we want to stay with all of the temptations of the world. So yeah, I would say that is pretty Gnostic.
But you generally, as a religious person, you would consider yourself agnostic. Ooh! I see what I did there.
I see what you did there, but I would not actually consider myself a Gnostic.
No?
No.
How would you label yourself in terms of religious beliefs?
I would say, I was thinking about this today. And
what a coincidence. You study religious studies.
So I was thinking about that. I think that belief is something that moves things in the world. So it would be pretty silly not to believe in something. So I'm experimenting with beliefs in
wow,
in a lot of things.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So what's your latest experiment?
Astrology.
Yeah?
Yeah. And tarot.
Okay.
And
the cards.
Yeah. But through these experimentations, I've also found out that maybe the belief also is not the prerequisite, but it's just something that it sort of unravels the actual order of things.
Belief is not the prerequisite, but it unravels the actual order of things.
I will have to revise that sentence. I know. The thing is that many of these things that I've been studying now in this master program, and also the things that I've been experiencing during the past half year that I was abroad in South America, are not something that I can really explain very well.
That's a nice bridge. What were you up to in South America?
Well, I was doing an internship that was part of this master program, and it was at a spiritual center called Fundación Vocación Humana, and it's
Fundación Vocación Humana. Yeah.
It's a center that helps a person find their vocation. So you go there and you're guided by introductions to a lot of different spiritual and philosophical traditions, and there are meditation classes, and you become also very well versed in some of Jung's ideas. And that's what I was doing there for.
Yeah, like concretely, how did it operate? As in, like, what kind of facility was it? How are the people there? What vibe did it have? What activities did you do?
I think we talked about this already earlier, but Jungians are kind of a little bit religion. Like Jungian psychology is a bit of a religion, because everybody's working with their dreams. Everybody's doing some things like shadow work, and everybody knows about concepts such as archetypes and collective unconscious and anima and animus. So it was really special going to this place and just having conversations with people. So basically, the first question, the facilities, it's an old Freemasonry building.
Wow.
So when you walk in, the corridor is completely circular. I've never seen such a room.
Wow.
That's the entrance point. And it's like nice old wooden staircases and windows painted with different colors, and this beautiful esoteric library full of wonderful things and a beautiful garden and meditation rooms, and it's a private institute, so most people there were a little bit older. Also, there's something
Did those people also all appear as if they were like drifting in their own universe, or is it not that bad? I'm simply like testing out stereotypes here.
No, I mean they were all this kind of Argentinian 40 to 60-year-old, because there seems to be something about Jungian psychology that
appeals to women.
Appeals, well, to women, but also to people who are in middle of their middle age crisis. So that when they really come to like, okay, I want to look for some direction that is really something that resonates with my deepest ways of being. And but the director of the institute...
You know what I find funny? Like a lot of things you say, I feel like you phrase them in some kind of ironic way, yet I also intellectually know that you are completely serious. Like this is also an example, you know? Like as in, well, okay, middle age resonates, meaning, you know, it's as if something someone would say who like criticizes Jung, but I don't know, you would never seek to criticize Jung, so I think that's interesting.
Yeah, okay, that's an observation that I don't know how to really put into my own perspective. But okay, I'm not meaning to sound ironic, but the whole
I know you don't. That's a funny thing.
I think that was we talked about this. It's just because I found the whole experience to be very absurd. I mean,
I think that's an important topic that we need to spend some words on. The idea of absurdity.
The absurdity of life.
Because this is a big topic for you.
It's a really big topic for me, actually. Yeah.
What about it?
Well, the whole thing is pretty crazy, no?
I tried to approach it when I discussed modernity. I at first had the feeling that for you it's mostly related to modernity. Well, obviously we don't know how it is to live in any other age.
Yeah.
So yeah, what is this absurdity?
Yeah, like we were talking already earlier, something that also drew me to studies in both in psychology and religion is that I guess I'm also one of these people who's on a quest to look for some kind of meaning. And if you look for meaning around yourself, if you really start to look at things, essentially at this time and age, you just see people who are constantly consuming things and being really disconnected from themselves and from the world, and we're just drowning in material shit. And yeah, it's the whole thing is just very strange. I mean, it seems to be that we just have everything, but we are very unable to make ourselves to have purposeful ways of living. But I don't believe that that's an illusion. I believe that it's completely possible to have life that is filled with significance.
I'm reminded of a more kind of pragmatic question, so to say, because what we're doing right now and what you are doing are being pretty academic, pretty intellectual, pretty abstract, pretty reflexive, pretty self-aware when we talk about these topics. But the question is that needed to attain what you are trying to attain? Or maybe is it productive? Is it maybe counterproductive? Does it not matter?
You mean the search?
No, because as you argue, everyone should be on that search. But imagine a person who is not at all capable of like reflecting the way you're doing now. Should the search be necessarily intellectual also?
No, not at all. Not at all.
But then that's a paradox, because how can you find authenticity if you don't know what it is you're looking for? And you have this now sophisticated way of knowing what authenticity is. So yeah.
I think it's just about, a lot of it is trying to go towards simplicity, because I think that's actually something that we are really lacking as well. And in order to look for simplicity in one's life, you don't need to be intellectual. You don't need to be even reading books. It's just about paying attention, being somewhere and doing something properly, being present and connecting. And those are the things that most people seem to really enjoy. And that's like something that gets them out of bed. And you can do that in any context, and you can do that with anything.
Being present as in the moment without thinking of responsibilities in the future or past.
Well, I mean, I think it's what I meant by that is just that whatever you're doing, whether you're on your free time, leisure time, enjoying something, or whether it's your job, that you are present with it and that you're engaging with it. And I think that's something that we all need. And for me now, it's just been about looking for these things in books and stuff like that. But I definitely don't think that that's the way how everybody should be doing their way.
No.
I mean, I also enjoy a lot of practical things. And I think actually some of the greatest moments are found in those things when you just can really immerse yourself in whilst just doing one activity and not thinking about anything much at all.
What about esotericism?
Oh yeah, this one. So as you know, I've been studying esotericism now for a year and a half. I'm currently in the process of completing my master's degree. So I still have to write it. But I guess what you meant to say is that, what you meant to ask, what is esotericism, or
However you want to interpret it.
Okay, I went to these studies kind of by accident. Just for those who don't know what esotericism is
As if anyone would not know.
it's a branch of different traditions that have been mainly associated with Western tradition, but also they are from other traditions that are non-Western, that have been somehow marginal or secret. Usually they are spiritual or religious in nature. Some of those examples would be alchemy, occultism, hermeticism.
They all have that thing in common. It's like secret, yet religious, yet outcast.
Yeah, exactly. And not very well studied. I think that's also one common characteristic, is that not many people know about them.
Would it by definition be no longer esoteric if it was thoroughly studied?
Well, that is a good question actually, because it's one of the characteristics is it that it's usually been knowledge that has been for particular groups or maybe for elitist groups, and that it's been hidden from the rest. No, I think the esoteric wisdom retains its core, even though it is becoming public now. I mean, everybody can learn about these things online, of course.
And something about that core is related to the common theme in your interests, this sense of transcendence, of everlastingness, of meaning, of strands of a different story all leading to the same road.
Yeah. I mean, I think what drew me to esotericism was partially this experience that I had in my life since a child, because I had this Christian upbringing, but I would really, as a kid, think a lot about it. And I would ask my parents always, like, but what about those people who live in Indonesia, for instance, you know? It's like, isn't this Christianity thing kind of part of our culture here? And they would have probably never heard about it before. And they were just like, oh no, you know, maybe there's a special place in heaven for those people who never heard of Christ. Or then there's some good missionaries who will go there and tell them. And I was like, no, there is something wrong about this.
They actually believed that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of beliefs.
Yeah.
But anyways.
It's really common to think that, so it's so crazy to imagine.
It's so crazy to imagine.
Yeah.
But esotericism, in a sense, has one of the themes is that perhaps all religions have same core or point to the same thing. And that's one of the ideas that I find very interesting to look into. It's also one of the ideas that I find very hopeful, because maybe we could, a lot of conflicts arise because we believe in different things and we don't accept the other one's beliefs. But if you look at the basic principles in almost any religion, they are very similar. It's like, be good to yourself, be good to your neighbors, be especially good to your neighbors.
You know what I just realized? You know what's funny? Like, a lot of the topics we discussed and the topics you're interested in, they have this connotation of obscurity. Like, in a way, even esoteric is sometimes used as a synonym for obscure. But what's funny is that the reasons why you are interested in all these topics is actually for the very opposite reason, namely that you believe that they are all part of things that operate around us constantly. As also you said that Jung believes that we always personally struggle with our own personal myth. Do I say that right?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way of summarizing it actually. And that's also been my own experience. And that's related to the absurdity thing, is that I did not anticipate as I went to study such a niche topic in university that it would be something that I all of a sudden would encounter in a lot of different places. Because perhaps maybe people are not familiar with this term esotericism, but a lot of people are interested in talking about spiritual beliefs and about commonalities also between different religions. And I found that there is a lot of openness to this kind of idea.
Yeah, if I may now coin the very ugly phrase commonality, of which we are talking about here. I'm gonna be like the very annoying devil's advocate here, because what if I actually say to you, but hey, imagine you were already looking for, you already had this bias towards finding this commonality somewhere, and wherever you went in your academic travels, you would find it, and you happened to land in religious studies, and then you thought, oh hey, myths, this fits perfectly well into my critique of psychology.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point to make.
It's not a point, it's just like devil's advocate. How would you respond to it? Because I imagine you are confident enough to reject it.
Well, I think also that we are living at such crazy times in regards to all of the things that are happening in the world, in regards to politics, the climate change, and the sort of this general destruction of the planet, and this growing divisions between people's social classes, and all this kind of madness that's really, I would classify as madness, is that maybe something that seems very crazy may actually be true at times. And that's what I also found out about these esoteric beliefs, that many of these things that a lot of people have throughout history hidden away, ignored, maybe even burned, witch burnings, like they've killed loads of people who've engaged in these kind of practices. Maybe there is something true about all of these things that we think are completely crazy.
There is like this knowledge gap in a way that we seek to address when we look at society and when we look at ourselves. And this knowledge gap is this like basic question, why do we do things even though it's pretty counterinstinctual, or it's pretty like easy to see that what we're doing is self-destructive or something. Like, what enables that self-destruction in a way? And your answer to that would be, well, this esotericism, myth, and so on. Do you have a motto or a wisdom that you want to give towards the young, hopeful, big-eyed 13-year-old boy or girl that is listening right now and thinking, oh boy, Johanna, just want to be like her? What is the one thing that you would give this poor child and impart it into the world with? That's my question.
Oh my goodness.
And don't say be yourself. Many people already said that. That one is already trademarked. Go with the flow, it's a maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna say the same thing. I got this advice actually just a few months ago from a person who I didn't even know, and I really admired them for being so
himself.
so themselves that they told it to me.
So what?
I just really thought that it was so lovely that they told it to me, even though they didn't know me so well. And this person told me, you don't need anything. You are just fine. There's nothing you need. Everything that you need in life in order to do it, you have it in you. And I think that's the advice that I would like to give other people.
It's very nice.
Yeah, because we don't essentially we just don't need anything, and the only motor that we have is just like our own drive, and we just gotta make what we can out of it.
I think that's very nice ending note. I want to thank you very much for listening all the way through this podcast once again. I also hope you enjoyed the completely irrelevant images that we're playing right now. I already added a little bit of text, but part of it is me walking around, part of it is me biking around with a bakfiets, which is Dutch for, well, loosely translated, what would it be? Like cargo bike, something. Anyway, yeah, and there's a very beautiful girl. She's the stabilizer for the cargo, also in one of the images. So there you go. Beautiful summer day. Was nice to look at. So once again, thank you for listening.
Please give me that like, subscribe, and comment. Tell us what you think about
Jungian psychology and the absurdity of modern existence. And now it's time for the outro.